Welcome to Athlon U here from Athlon Sports. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on the internet at Braden Gall.
And I'm Stephen Lassen. You can also follow me on the internet at all of your favorite social media sites that you like to scroll and waste time, or you can read my work at athlonsports.com.
Age-old debate in June in college football, whose coach is better? We will rank our favorite coaches in college football. Of course, settling on a criteria is equally as difficult. Who would you hire right now? Who's had the better career? Who do you trust to win a big game? Who do you think's the better schematic coach? Who do you think's the better CEO? Who do you think's the better recruiter? All things that matter, and beauty, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. So we'll rank them by conference, group of 5, and then we'll give you our national rankings as well. Sure to upset, outrage, and just generally piss people off. So sit tight and hang out for that. Got a couple of bits of news here from the expansion world we'll get to, as well as Stephen, they're meeting again. This time, as I said, in one of my favorite places this week, the power brokers of our sport meeting in Asheville, North Carolina. Just glad to have Asheville, North Carolina back hosting major events again after all that happened with Hurricane Helene. It is a very near and dear place to my family's heart and to my heart. And so at least glad to see that they're hosting big events. But I just, Asheville's a pretty cool spot for one of these gatherings. And there's going to be some tweaks potentially to the selection process of our playoff. So there you go. That's what's coming up on the show today.
Are you disappointed they didn't invite you? Like, you could have done your forced family vacation in Asheville and just kind of meandered your way over to some playoff meetings, get a glimpse of Greg Sankey coming in and Tony Petitti.
Who do you think I am? Ross Dellinger? Come on now. Although I did stand on the sideline of the Senior Bowl with Pete Thamel and 2 SEC coaches, and we all just shot the you-know-what about the number 1 overall pick, which at the time was here in Nashville, Tennessee, of course, and they had no idea what was going on. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. I don't know why I told that story, but I felt like it was meaningful because Pete Thamel, of course, is the one with all the information about what's going on when it comes to expansion. Pac-12 expansion, AAC, Sunbelt, you name it, all kinds of implications. We'll get into that stuff. And then, of course, Thamel's the one, or excuse me, Dellinger's the one who's just, hanging out outside of hotels for the rest of his life, trying to figure out what all these important people are doing and what they're thinking and what they want and what they're arguing about. Please make sure to give us some turn on the notifications. I'll get it out right, Stephen. Turn on the notifications. Give us a thumbs up. Like and share the product on YouTube. Please come swing by and watch the show. So if you want to watch and you want to see all those glorious mini helmets that Stephen keeps in his college football basement, you can come on by and see those. And we do appreciate that. If you're listening on the podcast app of choice, there's the SMU Mustangs. If you're listening on a podcast app of choice, we do appreciate that as well. Write a review for us. Give us 5 stars, because if you do not give us 5 stars, you are a
hater.
That is correct. I love hearing your voice inflection on that, big guy.
I could do it differently if you would like. I don't,
Go ahead. Let's see. Okay, go ahead. Try.
No, I need to practice off the air so that way.
One word.
It's
one word.
Braden, it's the off season. This is like we're getting into summer camps and workouts. I've been working out hard. I know you have too. So
who's your favorite June Jones quarterback?
It's got to be Cole Brennan.
See how easy that was? You said that boom. No reps, no practice needed. You are not. You will do it live. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Yeah. All right. So let's get the expansion. Let's get the expansion note here out of the way, which is, of course, this meeting in Asheville. And it sounds like they're going to add a strength of schedule metric, whatever the heck that means. I mean, I'm glad that there will be some uniform data around all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, the schedule being more difficult for one team versus another is kind of still even then in the eye of the beholder. So as much data as you put on there, you can look at a team and be like, you know what, on the road against Iowa State, I might think that's really difficult. Somebody else might look at that and be like, it's just not, you should win that game if you're a championship team. So I don't know what to make of that. I have long been under the impression, Stephen, that these folks always kind of take strength of schedule into account anyway. So I don't know if this is just to sort of appease the big conferences. What is really interesting is if the SEC and the Big Ten cannot come to an agreement because they are in complete control starting in 2026, there may not be expansion at all. And I thought, you know what? Mm-hmm. I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. I like the idea of just staying at 12 teams in 2026, 2030, 2035, 2040, whatever you want to make it. I like that idea. I do think it is interesting that that conversation has popped up this week. Like you have seen more say, well, they may just stay at 12 because they can't get on the same page. So here we go again, right? I mean, we fought to get the 4, then there was a fight to get to 12, and it was very extended. It was, a prolonged issue. So feels like we're getting to that point again. On the strength of schedule, I guess it's more putting it into like stone, essentially. Like they've taken strength of schedule into account. They have the Sports Info Solutions data in front of them, and they're like, if you've seen some of the screenshots, like it's all in there. And some of it's also just if you follow the sport, you kind of know like who's
How,
good, who's not. I mean, it's kind of like you're studying these teams and you're saying, oh, they played 3 ranked teams, they've played none. Like it's sort of in there. Uh,
how are you a fan of college football and not understand the Indiana scheduling dynamic from last year? Like you can't. My Indiana buddies and my non-Indiana buddies, all in my neighborhood, all understand Indiana's strength of schedule from last year. Like I don't know how you are a fan of this sport for the last ever,
yeah.
and not understand strength of schedule.
It's almost, I mean, I don't want to say like intuition or it's just like common sense. Like they have
Yeah.
to weigh strength of schedule when they're evaluating these teams. And so I guess maybe the idea is like it's just sort of fortifying or changing the bylaws or instructions of the
Yeah.
committee to say, here's some additional metrics for you. Look at them, take into account strength of schedule, because as we've talked about, one of the complaints about the SEC potentially going to 9 games and then the expansion for the playoff would be how those schedules are evaluated. So that to me seems to be a little bit of I would say, a gift to some of those SEC complaints.
Look, let's use common sense and let's acknowledge that if somebody plays a much harder schedule, that we give them credit for playing a much harder schedule, and if somebody doesn't, we take away credit. But that doesn't mean that that team is automatically better than the other team, and we have to use some common sense in all of this. And I think that's fair. I think putting it into some form of stone, I think, is complicated. I don't think it's clear cut. But if it makes them all feel better, and their feelings are all feeling, if they're not in their feelings about this stuff, then fine, let's do it. All right. So you want to talk about Instagram posts by university presidents?
Yes. Let's just say I was very intrigued by that one too. Yes.
So if you do not know, the president of Texas State, Kelly, is it Damphouse?
Damphouse, I think.
Damphouse. I guess he posted a photo of the San Marcos River runs right through campus, which is like that's where, if you saw, I think it was a couple years ago where they all had the players jump into the river.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool thing that happens down there. Not exactly a clean river, but there was pictures of beavers floating in it, and of course, beavers in the Brazos or whatever it was, the San Marcos or whatever river it is, and it wouldn't have. I guess he posted that on Instagram, and I can't believe I'm even having this conversation. Oh, what did a president post on? And then he shared it, I guess, from this other account that posted another version of the same thing. I'm like, he's sharing his own posts now? Is that what's happening with this president? Now, apparently his leadership, like by all accounts, the Pac-12, part of the reason they really want this school is that he has done a very good job leading this program. And with a head coach like G.J. Kinney, which we're going to talk about, you and I are both very high on, they're the top priority for the Pac-12 after swinging and missing on a few other programs in the AAC and the Mountain West based on money and dollars and exit fees and all kinds of stuff. If you need a reminder, Fresno State, Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Utah State are in the Pac-12 or will be in the Pac-12.
The State Department there.
Yeah, and then Texas State, of course, is going to be, it seems like will be added. I'm willing to bet you before July 1st.
Yes.
The buyout for Texas State will go from $5 million to $10 million on July 1st, which means what's going to happen is all these dominoes and ducks are going to be put into a row in the darkness of night in a back smoky room clandestinely. And then every step of the process is going to be unfolded in a matter of like 13 minutes. And they'll go from like, oh, we just started this process last hour to we voted and we're moving to the Pac-12. And it'll happen on June 30th.
Yeah, it seems like this is going to happen pretty fast, right? And it's there, like in the background of like last season and so far this offseason, there has been this like who is going to fill out the Pac-12, the new Pac-12, because they only have 7 football members now, and you have to have 8. They have Gonzaga in basketball. You have to have 8 to kind of be considered an official football conference. Doesn't also solve everything because you kind of need a ninth member so you can play 8 conference games and not have to like double up somewhere. So there's a lot out there, but it does seem like Texas State has kind of emerged in the pole position as the top expansion candidate. You mentioned they kind of went through the AAC teams. They couldn't work out the buyouts. And of course, there's the additional travel. So getting a team in the state of Texas, that's always a good thing. It's not that far from Austin, Texas State. So I think it's a university that has a lot of potential, and they have great leadership now, which really helps in this search to be the next Pac-12 school.
I want to be very clear, by the way. It is the San Marcos River. I got to be very clear. San Marcos River. First of all, random observation here when you said 8 conference games. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you only had a conference of 8 teams, like back to the old Southwest Conference or the old Pac-8, and you played all the other opponents, but then you played your arch rival twice, home and home? Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of charm in, this year the Cy-Hawk Trophy is going to be in Ames. This year the Cy-Hawk Trophy is going to be in Iowa City. And I think those are really, I do like the alternating elements of, the Iron Bowl and the big game. And like, I think the Civil War, I think that's cool. But like, there's also an element, like, would you be in favor of, we're going to play 8 conference games. We're going to play everybody else 7 times. But then we're going to play our arch rival twice. I don't know. That could be cool. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've thought about that. I even thought about, would they just leave the 8th conference game open at the end of the year, and you do like the Big Ten recommended the 2020 season, like a champions weekend where you just schedule like somebody. It's not the same because you don't have divisions and you only have 8 teams, but I like that idea. That seems like, let's get creative here.
I'm not trying to be rude, but that sounds like a terrible idea.
I think
leave your 8th game open. No, just play your rival twice, home and home each year. That way.
Yeah. So sure. I think what I would think in this scenario is like you could match up one, and I guess if you do a conference championship game, like that kind of takes away the 1 versus 2, but you could scramble up the matchups a little bit. But so maybe your idea of a rival was a lot cleaner than mine, but I think there's opportunities to get creative here.
Memphis, Tulane, a few other programs are like, nah, not really. We don't want to go to the Pac-12. Although there is some. It seems to be that Memphis is sort of like the key team to all of this movement in the future. They have, obviously, with FedEx money, they're in a geographically desirable area in a decent-ish size market. They've got basketball moving to the Big East. They're going to make a bunch of money on that new television contract. And so there is a thought that Memphis going football only might work. But at the same time, it feels like Memphis holding firm until another round of potential bigger expansion might be smart, Big 12 or ACC. In fact, if I'm the ACC, I think Memphis is a really valuable member because it's right down the road from Louisville, right up the road from a few other schools. So I could see the ACC going all in once they lose Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Miami. The Sun Belt, of course, is preparing for dominoes because if they lose Texas State, they're going to want to try to backfill that spot. Louisiana Tech seems like the top team. Because the Sun Belt, unlike these other leagues that have done this, of course, have done it with a very geographically rivalry-centric approach, which I think is cool. It's very MAC of them. And they already have a bunch of schools in Louisiana. They're going to make it easy on them for travel. They're going to make it easy on them from rivalries. And so Louisiana Tech seems like the target. Conference USA has, its own buyout laws and regulations and stuff, but it seems like Western Kentucky could be in the mix. Is Middle Tennessee a package deal with Western Kentucky? I don't know. I think Western Kentucky is far more appealing than Middle Tennessee, as much as I would love my pseudo alma mater to get some love there. I don't think anyone's leaving the AAC, though, because the money seems way too prohibitive for anybody to leave at least right now. I think, what is it, $25 million exit fee?
It's like
for the
27 AAC? Something. Yeah, it's up there.
That's a big number.
Yeah. I think the question we talked about with the Pac-12 would, and this is kind of floated out there too, is would UTSA be an option for the Pac-12? Like you take Texas State, you take UTSA, you've got 2 schools in the state of Texas. That's your 9th football member, and you get 2 universities in a state that's massive, a lot of population, potential to grow. It makes sense. Like you said, Memphis is kind of the key there. Like, what do they decide? Do they decide to split their sports into a couple of different conferences, or do they just sit tight and say, hey, we're going to get some more expansion probably in the 2030s, and we make a play for the ACC or the Big 12. So there's a lot of dominoes that could fall. It does seem like the first domino is going to be like Pac-12 makes its move. Then, of course, we'll see what the Sun Belt does, whether they go with Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, or someone else. Or someone else. Actually, the program that they potentially covet has been East Carolina, because they could slot into playing Marshall and Appalachian State and all those. So
again, big ask to leave the AAC.
Yeah, unless Memphis leaves, UTSA leaves, Tulane leaves. Still, I think that's right now. It seems to be unlikely the AAC is going to lose that many members.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And there's no real rush on the big school level right now. Like, they're pretty set until the 2030 round of negotiations that's coming, 2031 or whatever. When all the television contracts run out and all the other stuff happens, that's, playoff contract runs out, et cetera, et cetera. Grant of rights, all that good stuff. Yeah, I think Memphis, I think they would be appealing to a power conference situation. I'm not sure I'd want, like, Tulane was like, we're not really interested in going that far west. I just don't know if Memphis would be. I don't know if it would be best for Memphis to go out west and play all these teams. And by the way, remember, Pac-12 is still in a major legal situation with the Mountain West. They're still trying to save a bunch of money on getting that original round of teams. And here's the deal: can we just stop calling it the Pac-12 while we're literally trying to get a 9th team? Or I guess this is the 8th team. Can we just call it the Pacific Conference? Like the Pacific Coast Conference, the West Coast Conference. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can call this thing. The brand is not exactly a value right now.
It's not the Pac-12 that you and I grew up with Pac-12 After Dark and, all the crazy late night games between like Washington State and Oregon and UCLA playing at Washington State and Oregon State. So it's different, I guess, from a nostalgic purpose. Like, it's always appealing to me to see the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 logo and After Dark, but it is not anywhere close to where it used to be. And I think the dollars on the TV contract are definitely going to show that. It's going to come in, it sounds like 10 million or just under, based upon some of the reporting, which is a far, far cry from where it was with the other membership.
You just used the phrase like the Pac-12 I grew up with. You didn't grow up with the Pac-12.
Okay, it was the Pac-10. And
it was
then
the
Pac-12, yes.
It wasn't until 2012, right, where it became the Pac-12. I grew up on the Pac-10. The Pac-10 was the conference. Just call it the Pacific Coast Conference, the PCC.
Well, we have...
Yeah, know me. Come on, it's easy.
Well done. We have the Big 12 that has 16 teams. The Big 10 has 18. So, like, math, titles, that all just went out the window.
I know, but now you have a chance to change all of that. And the one that sounds the smartest, the two that sound the smartest are the ACC and the SEC, even though the Atlantic Coast Conference has teams from California in it. It doesn't, even though that's stupid, geographically, it still doesn't sound as bad.
It sounds like
college like the NFL calling itself like the 16 games. I'm done. I'm done.
I mean, it sounds like this is our platform to run for college football commissioner. We're going to rename all of these.
Not with my most recent communication strategy right here. My inability to come up with clever names about the NFL. I will lose all elections. All right. Okay. Anyway, keep an eye on it. Sun Belt dominoes expansion. If Texas State goes to the Pac-12, which seems like it could happen in the next 2 weeks, be aware of that, because then other things will happen afterward. All right. You want to argue about coaches?
Let's do it.
This is hard, man, because I hate everybody's list on the internet. I hate all of them. Except for yours. I like yours. Here's my question. And I think this really gets, when you're going to sit down and do this exercise, I think this is ultimately the first and most important and maybe only question you have to ask and answer. And that is, how do you evaluate the coaches who are very, very old?
Like Bill Belichick?
Because, well, actually, he's not necessarily a good example, but technically, yes. The balance of like career accomplishment versus who's hot now versus who I would hire today, and who do I think is equipped to handle the future of college football and the landscape that is there. I think the Big 12 and Kirk Ferentz. I think the Big 12 encapsulates all of this in a very sort of very difficult and complicated way, because I look at the rankings in the Big 12 and I go, all right, you have Kyle Whittingham, Rich Rodriguez, Mike Gundy, who have all been around forever and have been, relatively speaking, among the better coaches in college football. I think Whittingham's better than Gundy. I think Rich Rod is pretty solid, but also has had his moments, questionable behavior.
He's also won everywhere too. So
Exactly. So Mike Gundy is one of the perfect examples of this. So I guess I'll just put it to you. How do you weigh career? Like, clearly Kirk Ferentz is a phenomenal football coach, but are you going to hire him today over Kenny Dillingham? I know those are two different conferences, but bear with me here. Like,
yeah,
to me, there's the hot up and comer who has no career track record for us to lean back on. Again, Rhett Lashley is in this group for me.
mm-hmm.
Guys that accomplished a lot, but not very long. And even guys like Kirk Cignetti is like this weird blend of like, I've been around a long time, but not at this level, but I brought it up to this level and it worked pretty well. How do you parse all that out? What is your personal view of all that?
So first of all, it's really difficult to do this exercise. I enjoy doing this every year. It is also impossible. I tend to look at two different things when I'm doing mine, and this kind of gets at what you're getting at with criteria. I look at, okay, here's an entire coach's bio, here's their records, here's how they performed. And I also look at that in the context of the hierarchy of college football. It's hard to assume that just because a coach won at a lower level, he's going to win at a power conference level. But I think we can kind of assume if you're good at maximizing resources, if you're at a program that hasn't won and you're winning more than recent history, that speaks well of your coaching ability. So I look at kind of career bio statistics, and then I go to the second part, which is, okay, here's everything you know about these coaches, your subjective opinion. If you're hiring a head coach right now, who would you hire? So to answer your question, I'm probably a little bit more lenient, I guess, on the older coaches, just because of accomplishments. It's a tough decision to weigh because, to your point, would I hire Kenny Dillingham or Kirk Ferentz? I don't know. Kirk Ferentz doesn't seem like he's going to coach 8 more years, where I know Kenny Dillingham probably will. But I think just given those two factors, I kind of find myself somewhere in the middle of, if a coach has had that longevity, I tend to give him the bump in the coach rankings.
I also have always been like that. I think the one thing that changes that is the changing game. In that, the thing that will make you, there's always going to be some common theme that runs through all of this that makes you successful. Are you able to build good relationships with people that you trust and that they trust you? That's just about being a good leader, good communicator. You're going to have that. That's the same no matter what era. I remember interviewing Mac Brown when he came back to North Carolina, like the first year, and I kind of asked him, I said, well, what are the things that do you think have held true throughout your long absence? And he basically said, like, life is still about relationships. Recruiting is about relationships. Hiring coaches about relationships. Raising money is about relationships. So there's so much of this that still is just, you got to be good with people around you. You got to motivate. You got to lead. I think that stuff stays true no matter what. I think the X's and O's stuff stays true no matter what. I think you might be an innovator like Rich Rodriguez or Mike Leach. You might run sort of old school stuff. You might run nouveau chic stuff, but eventually X's and O's are X's and O's. The key that is different is this general manager, CEO roster thing that takes up so much of your time. Dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. While the problems change to some degree and the approach has to change, it's still the same stuff. You got to deal with young people who are not fully formed yet and fully developed yet, and they're going to make mistakes, and you got to deal with that stuff. A lot of this is the same. I think the one issue is that this generation of coaches, the difference between Mike Gundy and Kenny Dillingham and how they manage 2025 rules about rosters is a very different thing. It's just the first time ever where I might knock those older coaches down a notch unless they have shown me that they are capable of managing with the new rules. I would say James Franklin. He's been around a while. He's been a head coach for over a decade. He's not a spring chicken, but he's not an old guy. But I think he has shown the ability to adapt to how the game is being played around him. Do I think he's a great X's and O's schematic coach? No, I don't. Do I think he's a good recruiter? Yes. Do I think he's good with people? Probably. But there's questions about how the sport is played in terms of roster management, and I think he's answered a lot of those as a guy who's been around a little bit longer than some of the other guys.
I think that is a good way to sum up the changing aspects of the sport, because I think all these variables, roster management, NIL, transfer portal, it is a significantly, not necessarily significant in the job title, but you're adding a lot of different variables to this, because I think in the past, I think, X's and O's weighed a lot heavier for me in these discussions. Now I do think like managing your culture, building your program, roster management, all those things are things we have to think about now. I don't think we necessarily thought about these things like 10 years ago. So it is a good question. And also I will tell you, I think we're still so early in the data that I find myself sometimes, still trying to get a good grasp on all those factors in these discussions.
I think the other big one is marketing. Like you got to be now. Ideally, you hire really great people to run an entire marketing department. But you have the bully pulpit as the head coach of a program, and your ability to message will always be more powerful than a social media account or a production team that is clipping together some cool highlight reels of like your new 5-star corner on a practice field in training. Like the coach's ability to grab a microphone and attention from the fans and from rival fans, frankly, is still it's still the most powerful communication tool you have. And so Kenny Dillingham, again, to go to Dillingham, very good at that part of the job. He's just very good at it. Dabo Sweeney, not as much. Not as much. Same thing with Mike Gundy. Not as much.
Gundy's been a little quiet this offseason, hasn't he? Probably for good reason.
So, all right. So we've talked a lot about. Why don't we get into the Big 12? We'll start with the Big 12 because I find this one to be almost the most difficult. I'm just going to use. Here's an example. I have Sonny Dykes, Dave Aranda, and Joey McGuire, all basically together. And if you want to argue one guy over the other, I got no problem with that. I might lean Dykes and then go Aranda and then McGuire. That could change this year because I think they're basically evenly matched. But I have them at 11, 12, and 13 in the Big 12. And I say that as a compliment to the coaches in the Big 12. And while I would hire all three of them before Mike Gundy, who is the better football coach, Mike Gundy or those three guys? Hard to argue that Mike Gundy's career doesn't give him a slight edge on this. I say all that to say I think the Big 12, it's extremely deep and very balanced. So like everything else in the Big 12, very hard to predict.
Yes, it almost, when I was doing these coach rankings, and whether it was like Kalani Sitake or Willie Fritz or Dave Aranda, after I finished them, I kind of stopped to myself and like, that feels low. But then again, it's like, okay, who do you move them over and move these guys around? I guess there's not a top 5 coach right now in the country in this league. I think given that Kyle Whittingham and Utah finished 5-7 last year, I think Whittingham could coach his way back into the top, certainly 6 or so, 7, maybe by the end of this year. But there's a cluster. Like if we were to do these 1 to 136, all of these coaches would come into kind of an extended row. I do like Gundy a little bit higher than Dykes and Aranda and McGuire, but that's not a slight on either one of those coaches. Like whether it's Aranda or McGuire or Dykes, these are all very good coaches in a deep league of coaches.
I felt like the top 4, though, were easy to pick for me. I say all that, and then I'm like, I felt the top 4. And then I think basically 5 through 13 is just a big, giant debate. I have Kyle Whittingham at 1. I have Matt Campbell, Iowa State at 2. I have Chris Kleiman at Kansas State at 3. And I have Kenny Dillingham at 4. You have to sort of temper expectations around coaches that have done it one time. And I think that's the case for a lot of these guys, in particular Kenny Dillingham. I think there's a lot of great stuff there. I think there's a lot to like about how he operates. I think offensively, we've seen him excel every step of the way. How he builds a program, how he manages it, all so far been very successful. I think there's a little bit more proof of concept with the other guys. I would be fine if you wanted to put Kleiman 1 or Campbell 1. I don't think you can put Dillingham 1. Those would be my top 4 in that order. Thoughts?
So we have almost the same top 4. I'll throw out my top 5 because this will kind of illustrate how close we are. I've got Kyle Whittingham at 1. Longevity. I do think Utah is going to rebound this year. So I think he was an easy pick for me. I think Matt Campbell, coming off the best season in Iowa State school history. I've got him at 2. I've got Chris Kleiman at 3, pretty consistently winning 8-9 games at K-State. I've got Lance Leipold at 4. I'm not selling my Kansas or Lance Leipold stock after last year. I think they will rebound. We have seen this at lower levels or the job that he's done at Kansas. He is a winner, and I expect them to rebound. And I have Kenny Dillingham at 5. So I think we're pretty close, despite this conference being hard to rank. I think it sounds like we're pretty close in the top 5.
Also important to note for those of you listening, we did not compare notes on this. We brought our lists in order to have a conversation about this. I have Leipold at 5. So if you want to convince me that he belongs at 4 and Dillingham's 5, I'd have no problem with that. And then we'd have the exact same order, which means independently we came to the exact same evaluation of these guys. Now, this is where it's going to get super interesting. I have Willie Fritz next because I just think he's a phenomenal coach. Like, slow build every step of the way, finds success, knows how to build a program, and it seems like he can manage no matter what the environment is, no matter the area. Like, he's just is a great football coach. I've got Fritz there. Then I go Rich Rod and Gundy based on career sort of accomplishment. Because, again, very good coaches, just not their heyday anymore. Deion Sanders is at 9 for me. Kalani Sitake's at 10. I'd be fine if you put Sitake at 5 or 6. I'd have no problem with that. I think Sanders, I don't think can coach at all, but I think he's obviously knows how to run a program. We're going to find out more this year. If you want to put all your eggs in hiring that guy, fine. I just need to see more substance and less flash and just a couple of great players before I consider him an elite coach. In fact, if you told me you had Sanders at like 14, which seems insane, and behind, do I think Dave Aranda and Sonny Dykes are better football coaches than Deion Sanders? Probably. But in the modern era, it's about roster management, it's about marketability, and he's great at all that stuff. So I put him at 9 kind of as like I didn't want him to be too high, but I didn't want him to be too low. I felt like that was about right.
So I'm going to admit that I'm too low on Willie Fritz because I had him at like 11, but that's also, I kind of weighted his debut at Houston probably a little too much, and the fact they just, they were 4-8. I think they're going to be a lot better this year. So he's 11th in my rankings, and I've got Rich Rod at 6, so I don't think there's actually that wide of a gap. So I've got Rich Rodriguez at 6, Kalani Sitake at 7, I've got Deion Sanders at 8, Mike Gundy 9, Sonny Dykes 10, and Willie Fritz 11. So I think all of those coaches, however you want to order them, that I can't really argue with you. I do think Sitake, I think probably I've got him 7th. You've got him a little bit lower. But I think given that BYU took such a big step forward last year, I'm willing to give him a little bit of a bump in these rankings. So that's why he made a big jump from last year to this year for me.
But like, is he a better football coach than Mike Gundy? There's nothing on the resume that indicates that he is.
Last year? I mean,
okay, but why would that outweigh the other 15?
No, fair point. You could also look at this as a are we seeing just Gundy reach the very end of his coaching career, and he is just completely cratered out? And Sitake, I think, is still kind of on the upswing. So that, I know to give you a boring answer, we're going to find out this year. And either you're buying some Gundy stock when it's pretty low, or you're getting Gundy stock when he is just on the way down. And I don't know where my confidence level is right now if this team is going to rebound in 2025.
If Sitake had done what he did last year and that was it, like that was his high thing, and that's the only big jump up year after 2 bad years, then I would say that you're right. But like he's been at BYU a decade, and he's had some good teams. He's had 3 10-win seasons and a bunch of bowl games, but he's finished ranked in the top 25 3 times out of 9 years. Like I'm sorry, Mike Gundy is better than that. Now, it doesn't mean that Sitake isn't evolving and going to get better and become a better thing, and BYU becomes a premier power in the Big 12. Totally possible. And I think he's I think he's a good coach. This is not anti-Sitake take. This is a 10-year. He's got a 10. This is not some random new guy. Like he's had 9 years of coaching, and 2 losing records. So that's good. That's 7 winning seasons. but also 2 bad seasons. So just BYU hasn't had enough big time success yet for my money.
Here's another way to look at this, and also another variable. If you're just looking at like the last 5 years of Kalani Sitake's career, 3 of
Oh,
those
yeah, I see how
produced
you.
like,
I
well,
see how you.
I'm saying like how like this is a good debate. Like how we talked about longevity for Whittingham and Gundy and some of these other guys. Like, is Sitake on the rise here? Which it does seem like to me. I mean, they went
Sure.
5-7 in their first season of the Big 12. That doesn't surprise me. They got a lot better in year 2. I'm not buying necessarily BYU for 2025, but this is another variable that you have to take into account, is sort of like trajectory and sort of like where they are kind of on that timeline.
You do know that Gundy has a 12-win season, a 10-win season, an 8-win season,
Mm-hmm.
and a 7-win season in that last. This is like a hockey stat.
Yeah.
Like in the last 14 games, so and so's had 46 assists. It's like you can just pick any number of games you want in an NHL season and get like a new stat that you want. I don't know. By the way, I didn't realize this. How old was Gundy when he got the job in 2005? Gundy's only 57. He's only 8 years older than Sitake.
Yeah.
I don't know why this turned into a Gundy Sitake I but
I wanted to make one kind of criteria thing too, a point on that. I do not consider head-to-head results at all in these rankings. I know it's a very popular point, like Coach A beat Coach B. Why is he behind or ahead of him? I don't consider head-to-head rankings or games at all in discussing coach rankings. Is that fair?
yeah, I probably agree with you. I think there probably is some occasions where it probably matters, and that's sort of like if you're at 2 equal schools, 2 equal programs with equal resources and relatively equal expectations, and you have a very lopsided record.
Yeah.
Like basically you're both really good coaches, you both have really good programs, and you both win a lot of games. But so and so is like, again, this is I would not put Gundy versus Oklahoma in this category. I think Oklahoma is a superior program with superior resources. And so I don't care as much about his record against Oklahoma. But like Michigan, Ohio State, equal resources. And this is where James Franklin gets in trouble. Because James Franklin and Penn State have largely equal resources to Ohio State, and head-to-head, he doesn't win the game.
I think in those select cases, I would be willing to weigh it, but I
Agree.
know every year when I post these rankings on the website, it's like, well, this 11th ranked coach beat the 10th. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're grading the whole career here.
Like Ryan Day versus Luke Fickell is not a fair fight. The schools aren't fair. LSU versus Arkansas, great rivalry game, not a fair fight for the Arkansas coach. So there's most of the time I agree with you. I don't take it into account. But in a select situation, like if Billy Napier goes on to have a really great career at Florida, and Florida wins a lot of games, but he is like 2-12 against Georgia, I think that matters. But only if like they both are pretty good over that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So
agree.
All right, let's go to the ACC. I debated really hard that Jeff Brom was the best coach in this conference. I think he probably is the best coach in this conference. But the accomplishment is not quite there yet, and it's hard to take a guy with 2 rings off the top. I think a lot of it is about, I think this Clemson team is really good, and I believe that Dabo can show us that he's still got it. And if he does, then I think he clearly belongs based on not only current ability, but also track record, that Dabo Swinney kind of has to be number 1 in the ACC. I have Jeff Brom at 2. After that, it's real tough.
Yeah.
Where are you on a Dabo versus Brom, or do you have a third name in there?
So to me, it is a Dabo Brom conversation at 1. Honestly, I didn't really spend a ton of time on it. I still think Dabo's got to be number 1. I do think there is a question of, in the portal NIL era, can Dabo get Clemson back to the top? I think there's a good chance they can do that this year. So I think we were kind of wondering, did Clemson sort of reach its peak under Swinney, going into last season, but they made the playoff, they won the ACC. It feels like they are back. So he kind of answered some questions there. I've got Brahma 2, and then to your point, 3 through 5, what do you do with Bill Belichick? Those were all hard conversations for me.
I'll double check here, but I don't think I have. I have Bill Belichick at 21, so I don't have another ACC coach in my top 20. So I've got Dabo and Brom in the top we'll get to that. But I have here's my order. You tell me what you think.
Okay.
I have Belichick at 3, based obviously on his track record here. Mike Norvell is real hard to place, but you can't argue the success in the career based on one bad season, kind of like Gundy. So I've got Norvell at 4. I've got Rhett Lashley at 5. I think 6 is still way too high for Mario Cristobal. But that's where I got him, because running a program is still a big part of the job, and he knows how to at least acquire talent and run a program. I'll put him at 6. I got Manny Diaz at 7. I don't know what to make of Fran Brown, Dave Doran, Pat Narduzzi, Brent Key. Like, those guys are all the next group there for me. Bill O'Brien's been around a long time and has a lot of good seasons and a lot of success, relatively speaking. It was very easy for me to pick the bottom 3, just like it was very easy for me to pick the bottom 3 in the Big 12, which is simple. But I don't know. I got Belichick, Norvell, Lashley, Cristobal, Diaz. That's my next group. What do you think?
So I have a different order, and I'm going to say my third coach in the ACC, and I'm going to let you just tear it apart. I've got Mario Cristobal at 3. I know you hate it. Thinking on our ability to build a program, he can recruit. They've signed the ACC's best signing class 4 straight years. They've improved right to the doorstep of the playoff. Yes, it was a missed opportunity. At some point, I like the idea of a coach being able to gobble up all this talent in a conference where the gap between the top and the middle and the bottom half of the league is pretty wide. So I have some skepticism about Cristobal, but this also gets at the skepticism of some of these other coaches in the league, because I got Rhett Lashley at 4. I like the trajectory here. They won the American, then they went to the ACC. They played for the conference championship game, made the playoff. I got Mike Norvell at 5. And again, this is tough. Am I weighting last year too much? Because if you take out last year, he needs to be 3rd on this list. But we can't just ignore a 2-10 debacle here. And at 6, I can't believe I got Brent Key at 6 and you barely mentioned him. He's our guy this year, our Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Braden, I'm disappointed in you.
If I'm going to look at a guy who won the Big 12 championship and got to the playoff and say you still have to do it more than 1 year, then I need to see more from Brent Key, and I got to play it. I got to play it consistently. The exception, of course, to this rule in my mind is Bill Belichick, who is the greatest NFL coach of all time, and that has to count for something. So he has never coached in college. He may be terrible at this, and that I'll move him down. And if your argument to keep Belichick low is like, no, just never seen it before in college, I'll be like, okay. And some of the PR stuff that he's done, that's a problem, because we're talking about messaging and marketing your product. I just don't understand the Mario Cristobal argument here, other than, again, like, great at luring talent. This guy was 20 games under 500, got fired as a head coach at FIU. He was solid.
Went to 2 bowl games at FIU. It's a very hard job.
He was solid at Oregon, really solid. Again, same exact methodology, never really won anything. So he's been a head coach for like 13 years and has never won anything. So I think I'm being generous by putting him at 5 or 6 and saying I think you get the credit for the stuff you are very good at. But the rest of it, I don't know. So right now, Rhett Lashley, I would hire Rhett Lashley over Mario Cristobal. Norvell is complicated. Belichick is complicated. And if you want to put Cristobal ahead of them, I got no problem with that. Norvell is interesting, though, because I agree, like, one bad season, you got to have Norvell pretty high on this list. Like, in a weird way, like, you kind of have to acknowledge that one season does not wipe away more than just, because it's not just a perfect season at Florida State in the power conferences. Like, that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment that nobody else on this list has, other than, I guess, Dabo. It's not just that; it's stuff he did before. He's had a good track record the whole time. We'll see what he does. So,
I think you said the word complicated there, and I think that's a good way to sum up the ACC coaches after Swinney and Brom. I don't think there's much debate about those two. You can debate maybe how far the gap is now, but I think anything at, whether it's Cristobal, Lashley, Norvell, Belichick, I've got Belichick at 7. I'm a little lower on him than you are. I understand the argument to have him higher based upon track record. I also saw those New England Patriots teams at the end of his tenure, and they were pretty rough. So I don't know what, but
You're going to ding Bill Belichick's seasons in the NFL. You're going to ding his resume in the NFL.
no,
If you're going to ding him, you say never coached in college, never accomplished anything, doesn't know, no idea if he knows what he's doing down here on this level, different sport. Totally agree with you. If you're
sure.
going to tell me that, I don't know if I trust him those last couple of years in New England, well, then I get to throw the first 22 years in New England in your face. So
Did he lose his fastball?
no idea.
That's why I have him 7th.
His fastball went to Tampa Bay.
True.
No, I just like I again, no problem with literally if you put Belichick 1 or if you put Belichick,
Yeah.
you can't put him 17 because Frank Reich's 17 because he's not even a real head coach. But if you put him at 16, I got no problem. I have no issue with where you put Belichick.
Yeah.
What you cannot do though is bring in a negative from his pro career without then also acknowledging all the positive. You can either ignore the whole pro career or you can bring it all in, right? You can't kind of pick and choose. Is my opinion.
No, 100%. I just think that there's a chance that North Carolina is not getting peak Bill Belichick here. And
I totally agree with you.
I have some massive skepticism of some of their portal acquisitions and also their coaching staff. And so I'm not enamored with what they've assembled. But I will say, looking at the ACC, there is an interesting collection after, whether it's Doran, Narduzzi, Diaz, O'Brien, Fran Brown, to your point. These coaches, much like the ones in the Big 12, are just clustered together.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe how 2025 plays out is probably going to shape a lot of our opinions on these guys.
I have Diaz at 7, Fran Brown 8, Brent Key 9. I like all three of those guys. They're kind of rising right up the ranks right now. Wherever you have Dave Doran, you have to have Pat Narduzzi right next to him, either ahead or below.
Yes,
like you have to put those two together. Yes, where you can have them 3 and 4, but they got to be close together. You can have them 8 and 9, but they got to be close together. They got to be next to each other because they are. In fact, I don't think anyone's ever seen them in the same room at the same time.
I had that same problem. Yeah, I had them 8 and 9 in my ranking, so they are back to back.
I lean Doran over Narduzzi. Is that weird? Am I wrong on that or not?
That's what I have too. I have Doran over Narduzzi.
Ryan Day 1, Dan Lanning 2. I think that's pretty easy in the Big Ten. I eventually put James Franklin at 3, and I understand. But Lincoln Riley's complicated. Kirk Ferentz is complicated. Kurt Cignetti's resume is complicated. I think the middle of the Big Ten is really good. Once you get to Brett Bielema, PJ Fleck, Matt Rule, Schiano, Fickle, Smith, Moore, that's a good collection of coaches in the middle of the Big Ten. Anybody you consider over Ryan Day and Dan Lanning? Did you consider Dan Lanning at number 1?
I have James Franklin at 2.
Oh, okay.
Not easy. I think they are pretty much like back-to-back. In fact, I have them back-to-back in my top 10. I understand the argument for either one, so I'm not like hardcore James Franklin or like against Dan Lanning. It's just sort of an acknowledgement that, longevity for Franklin. I also think he's done a good job of adapting. I think he's also very good at pushing consistently for resources. Also, I know it's been a while, but his tenure at Vanderbilt to me is one of the more impressive tenures I think we've seen, in modern whatever since the last 20 years. Vanderbilt was just struggling in the SEC, came in, produced, 3 straight bowl games, including a 9-win season. So I think that speaks well to his ability to get the most out of the roster. Yes, he's had some ups and downs. Yes, they need to beat Ohio State. Yes, they need to beat Michigan. But I think recruiting, track record, longevity, I have Franklin at 2. I've got Lanning at 3. But like I said, if you went Lanning 2 and Franklin 3, I'm not going to disagree with you.
He's like a much better Mario Cristobal.
Yes.
Yeah. Makes mistakes in the game. Great CEO. Great at roster building. Great at marketing. Great at managing communication strategies. And some success as a head coach in a previous conference. I have Day, Lanning, Franklin top 3 in the Big Ten, and then I have Cignetti, Ferentz. I think Lincoln Riley, X's and O's wise, might be among the best here. Brett Bielema continues to prove that he's just a ball coach, man. Like he probably needs to be pretty high. I think PJ Fleck, Matt Rule, Schiano, these guys have better resumes than you think. I think they're all pretty good coaches. Sharon Moore, I really struggled with. I didn't know where to put Sharon Moore. I think he could be a really, really good coach, But like, if you ask me, has he accomplished more than Jonathan Smith? I'd say no. Has he accomplished more than Luke Fickell? I'd say no. Has he accomplished more than Shiano and Matt Rule and PJ Fleck? I'd say no. So I feel weird putting Sharon Moore at like 12 or 13. But it's hard to argue that he belongs higher than that. I'm just like, I would hire. I mean, Bielema is kind of weird because it's just he's kind of an older guy and he kind of has to have a certain type of school. Lincoln Riley is the other one. Like what a brilliant coach, and just cannot handle the marketing and communications well at all, and can't hire coordinators either.
I think he's got a good. I think he's fixed some of those problems. Yes,
You've said that every summer for 5 years.
The defense got better last year. Danton Lynn did a good job. They've hired a lot of dudes in the off the field roles to improve the personnel. So yeah,
I think Lincoln Riley's a good coach.
Yeah, I think there are some questions about a lot of how he's handled certain things. Yes, so I will give you that. I do have Kirk Ferentz at 4. Longevity, track record, keeps winning. I have Lincoln Riley at 5. This is the hard part, much like Mike Norvell. If you're just weighing last season, 7-6, they had a lot of close losses. That definitely kind of impacts things. I've still got him at 5. I don't want to move him down too much, but then it's Cignetti, Bielema, Matt Rule, and PJ Fleck in the 6 to 9 range for me. So to your point, like about 15, there feels like there's 15 pretty solid coaches in the Big Ten. It feels weird, but you mentioned Sharon Moore, Barry Odom. I love the hire for Purdue. I've got Barry Odom at 14 in my rankings. I still don't understand why Barry Odom took the job, but he's accomplished quite a lot from what he did at UNLV and kind of the track record of that school.
So the argument for me was to have Curt Cignetti above Kirk Ferentz and Lincoln Riley is that it wasn't just 1 year. It was 1 year on this level and 1 year even in the FBS level. Like it's I guess that's not true. James Madison had moved up for a couple of seasons, but he coached for 13 seasons as a head coach. And if you have Googled him, you would know that he's not had a single losing record at 4 schools. I'm sorry, that is enough for me to say, you know what happened in Indiana last year wasn't a fluke.
Right.
That's the point. Like, you could look at some of these other guys and be like, oh, Rhett Lashley, I need to see it again. Oh, Kenny Dillingham, I need to see it again. Some of these guys you might say, hey, I need to see it again. With Cignetti, I agree, you do need to see it again. But at one of the worst, most difficult places in all of college football, he had the greatest season in that school's history. And in 14 seasons as a head coach at 4 schools has never had a losing season. There is a lot more proof of concept with him than I think we realize. So that's why I might have, maybe I overvalued that a little bit, but I've got him. I think there's more there than, some of the guys that you're looking at going, oh, he just had a great year last year. Like Shane Beamer's another one. Really great year last year. He's been solid, but need to see a little bit more from him.
Yeah, and I think with Cignetti, it's not just, like you said, it's not just Indiana, but it's winning at James Madison, Elon, and IUP. Like, those are not easy jobs. Like, James Madison's was one of the better FCS jobs, and they moved up. But this gets at something you and I discussed at the beginning, which is I think it speaks well of coaches and this is a Lance Leipold thing too. If you're winning at a high level at lower levels of ball, and the competition keeps going up and you keep winning, I think that speaks well to your ability. Yeah. So I have Cignetti at 6. Now I'm kind of doubting maybe I should have had him ahead of Lincoln Riley.
I've got him at 4. I had him at 3 for a while, and then I was like, nope, James Franklin. I got to put James Franklin ahead of him, and I put Cignetti at 4. And then I honestly would hire Lincoln Riley before Kirk Ferentz, but Kirk Ferentz's career is so respectable. You got to give it you got to put spect on his name there. All right, SEC. Kirby Smart 1. Then where do you go?
I went Sarkisian. I actually didn't think there was much of a debate. Did you have a debate with yours?
Nope, I had Sarkisian at 2.
I've got Brian Kelly at 3, Kalen DeBoer at 4, and Lane Kiffin at 5.
Same 5. I have Kelly at 5.
Okay. So is that just
he needs to prove it this year. But you're right though, man, it's hard to argue. I just think Lane Kiffin has proven a lot. His ability to evolve, manage nouveau rules in college football, his ability to mature off the field. Like, I just think he's always been an offensive guru, and he's been a head coach for like almost 20 years. Like, he's had a lot, now not continuously, but he's had a lot of opportunities, and his teams are pretty good. And I think what he's doing at Ole Miss is almost unprecedented. I think Lane Kiffin's just a really good coach. He's a really good football coach. I would hire Lane Kiffin over Brian Kelly today if I had a choice.
I
And I
probably
honestly,
would
I can't
too.
believe what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I can't believe I'm even saying that out loud.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. The thing with Kelly is if you look at just career, it's much like Ferentz, it's some of these other guys. Cincinnati, Central Michigan, Notre Dame, Grand Valley State, and to a degree
No,
LSU.
you're right.
He's won a lot of games at, I'd say, harder jobs, and then he got to Notre Dame, took him to the playoff, and now LSU went to the SEC championship game in his first year. They need to get over the hump and get to the playoff. And I say this, I know I said this before on our show, but if Les Miles and Ed Orgeron win national championships, Brian Kelly's track record and coaching ability, he should be able to win one too. And I definitely think there's some uneasiness starting to set in based upon how the last 2 years went. I mean, there were fire Brian Kelly chants in November. So it's the pressure's definitely building, but I think that do you weigh that long-term track record? I mean, it's not like they've been awful. They've been winning 9 or 10 games every year since he's been there at LSU.
If you count his Grand Valley State days where he won like 118 games, and I don't think this is accurate because I'm looking off Wikipedia just for ease here, because it's giving me 0 wins, right, and 12 and 13, even though he won every game and went to the championship game that year. I mean, this guy's over 300 wins in college football, so maybe I'm too low on that. Maybe the recency bias is getting me with Notre Dame and LSU. I don't know. What do you think? He's 63 years old, 6 years older than Gundy. I don't know. Would you hire Kalen DeBoer is the interesting one because he's been so good, but only in like a 6-year window.
I think had Alabama not had so many, I shouldn't say so many, they had a couple puzzling defeats last year. I mean, Michigan.
I would say LSU's defeat to Alabama was puzzling.
Yeah, definitely. It felt like for every good thing that Alabama did, they also had a step back, which includes, like I said, Vanderbilt, a no-show at Oklahoma. I don't really, the bowl game is what it is. But I think had they made the playoff last year, and I think he'll be more comfortable in year 2 in the SEC. But I think had they made the playoff, I probably would have had DeBoer at 3 ahead of Kiffin and Kelly.
So you're saying one football game over a 25-year coaching career makes Brian Kelly better. That's what you just said.
No, what I'm saying is,
because if they beat Oklahoma, they make the playoff. That's it. You're saying one game against Oklahoma is how you'd move them from. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's what you're saying.
Not necessarily. I'm just saying he went in. Obviously, it's impossible. I mean, he physically replaced Nick Saban. There's no doubt, but it's also hard to replace the greatest coach in college football history. And there was going to be some regression. I think this is the toughest conference in college football. And if the replacement for Nick Saban is going to be this up and down, when in the past it's been pretty consistent under Nick Saban, is he going to be able to kind of stabilize that in the SEC? So I'm kind of wondering, okay, he's in these new surroundings. He's at Alabama. Is he going to be able to take this team to the playoff? And we saw last year, like I said, for every good thing they did by beating Georgia, beating LSU, they turned around and lost to Vanderbilt, lost to Oklahoma, and like I said, Michigan. So I would like to see a little bit more consistency in his new surroundings.
Best Vanderbilt
but not getting too much, though.
Best Vanderbilt team in history. The reason I think this is an interesting debate is because everything you just said about Brian Kelly, you could say about Kalen DeBoer. Everything you just said about Kalen DeBoer, you could say about Brian Kelly. A little too inconsistent, a little too up and down, loses games not supposed to, beats some teams impressively. I mean, he's lost 11 times in 3 years at LSU following a coach that won a national champion. All the same stuff. It's the same stuff. And they have that incredible track record at a lower level. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but at Sioux Falls, 67-3 with 4 national championships at the NAIA level for Kalen DeBoer before he got into big time coaching, kind of worked his way up through a coaching staff to get to Fresno State, but has been a fairly successful head football coach in a pretty big way at every stop as a head coach. So I don't know. I totally could see Kelly. And honestly, this debate might mean that Lane Kiffin's 3.
Our anonymous coach scouting would probably disagree with that, thinking that, of course, the Ole Miss had all this, maybe the best team they've had in some time, and they fumbled the end of the season by, of course, losing to Florida. So, and they had that weird loss to Kentucky. So, I think very highly of Lane Kiffin, but I also thought that he was a step behind at 5.
Let's see. Josh Heupel. I've got Josh Heupel at 6, Mike Elko 7. Might be a little high on Elko there. I got Eli Drinkowitz at 8, Billy Napier 9, Shane Beamer 10, Hugh Freeze 11, Clark Lee 12. Honestly, no argument with any order of those coaches. If you think Clark Lee has done the best job, I totally am on board with that. If you think Shane Beamer has the most upside and you want to take that guy, I no problem with that. If Eli Drinkowitz has done the best to modernize a program that's never really been like that, got to give him a ton of credit. I think Mike Elko is the best ball coach. And I think Elko is the best just straight up football coach in that group. So that's why I'd put him. And I think Heupel just gets how to like run a big program. And so I don't know if Heupel ever wins a championship, but I think he knows how to do this thing at a little bit higher level than Drinkowitz, Napier, Beamer, Freeze, at least so far. So and he's a national champion, of course. So I would, or was that Scott Frost? Who won the national championship at UCF?
Oh, it was Scott Frost. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Okay, never mind. Josh Heupel, almost national champion at UCF. I just think Elko and Heupel are the best coaches of that group. Venables, Pittman, Levy, no. So we agree on the top 5. We just disagree on the order. So
I have Heupel at 6. I actually have Drinkowitz at 7. I've got Shane Beamer and Elko 8, 9, and I guess I have Mark Stoops at 10. I don't feel great about it.
I've knocked him down a couple pegs because he's clearly on the way out.
Yes. Billy Napier could coach his way into that discussion. If you just graded on the curve and gave him the last couple games of last season, I would put him ahead of Mark Stoops. But Stoops is a longevity play there at 10.
I don't think you can. The problem with Napier is you can't ignore 40 and 12 at Louisiana.
Right.
That's a good record at Louisiana.
And he was like almost fired in October and September of last season too.
It's 59 and 31 overall. So I agree he needs to show more. If you're asking me right now, who do I believe in to build a program? And Hugh Freeze, I will admit, I'm knocking him down because I just don't get the risk. Like, he's a solid coach. And here's the other thing. I think Auburn's going to be really good this year. I just don't get the risk. It'll burn hot close to the sun, and then you'll get burnt and you'll fall back down to earth. So,
but you also might get a playoff and an SEC championship out of it, right?
When does he ever come close to an SEC championship?
I'm just saying, like, that would be the Auburn thing to do, though, under Hugh Freeze.
I hear you, but Hugh Freeze has never come close to sniffing an SEC championship.
I think it's going to be difficult this year and perhaps next year.
Hence why I don't understand the risk, because he's never come close to sniffing a championship of any kind. All right. So group of 5. Here's my group. This is also tough because you have to analyze the rock star up and comer who's going to move on quickly versus the lifer. The lifer. I've got Jeff Monken at 1. I think he's the best group of 5 coach in the country. Love the troops. And if you don't, you hate the troops. I've got John Summerall at 2 at Tulane. I've got Dan Mullen at 3. And then I got 2 lifers, basically, who've just been great. And that's Troy Calhoun at 4 and Bronco Mendenhall at 5. I totally understand the love for Chadwell and Traylor and Danielson and Albin and Creighton and Helton and Silverfield and Kendall. I like all those guys. I just think Troy Calhoun deserves credit for what he's accomplished over a long period of time at a place that's kind of tough to win. So
I am glad to see Troy Calhoun getting some love, because I feel like he is often overlooked in these coach rankings. Saying all that, I don't have him in my top 5, but he's pretty close. I've got our boy, John Summerall, as my best group of 5 coach. Probably won't be group of 5 much longer. I've got Jeff Monken at 2, Jamie Chadwell 3, Dan Mullen 4, and Jeff Traylor 5. To your point, like G.J. Kinney, Calhoun, Bronco Mendenhall. Also, there's like a handful of coaches in the American I think you could put in the next tier, like Casey Keeler.
Did you say Spencer Danielson?
I did not. I had him.
You don't like him, huh? Okay.
My 4th best coach in the Mountain West.
Oh, okay. I have Chadwell, Traylor, Danielson, Creighton, Helton, Silverfield, Candle, and Tim Albin all kind of in one group. Like, because they're all kind of like 2 more seasons, and they have a really good chance to be a Power 4 coach, but also have some track record of being a pretty good coach at that level. So we'll see. We'll see. I think Mullen, Calhoun, and Mendenhall are just like there's just too many wins on their resume. Like I had to put them in there. Summerall and Monken. I don't know why you hate the troops. All right, give me your
said
top.
good things about Air Force and Army, and mentioned Brian Newberry at Navy, who had a nice year last year too.
By the way, Ken Niumatalolo belongs in this conversation. San Jose
Yes.
State. He's seen better days, but he's a long track record of success. Jim Moore is another one. Long track record of success at this level, not other levels. Chuck Martin, been around a while.
So, he's my number one coach in the MAC.
There you go. Casey Keeler, want to mention him as well. Get his name on the list as well.
Pete Lembo,
100%. I agree. Bob Chesney, got to put him in there.
Yeah, I would have him as my number 2 coach in the Sun Belt.
Okay.
Kenny Chesney.
Kenny Chesney. All right.
DJ Kenny at 1, Bob Chesney at 2, Charles Huff at 3 in the Sun Belt.
GJ Bob Kenny Chesney. I love that. All right. So nationally, Kirby Smart 1. Any debate?
No.
Who you got at 2?
Ryan Day.
I also have Ryan Day at 2. I guess. I'm not anti Ryan Day. It just feels like a weird number 2, but I got Ryan Day at 2. I have Steve Sarkisian at 3.
I have Swinney.
Oh, you love Dabo, don't you?
Track record.
You've been in the name, image, and likeness for years.
I considered him at 2.
You are not hiring Dabo Swinney over Steve Sarkisian right now today. He is not a better but Dabo Swinney cannot scheme his way out of a paper bag. He is a very good program manager. Mm-hmm. Sarkisian is better at everything than Dabo Swinney. Except for maybe like managing the personal life there for a few years.
Well, true.
But now he's got it under. But now he's good to go. Now he's good.
You're not wrong. My only argument would be just longevity. I probably would hire Sark over Swinney if they were both sitting in the same room and I had to hire one today.
There is no probably about that. All right, so you have Dabo at 3. I got Sark at 3. I have Dan Lanning at 4.
I've got Sark. So I got Sark at 4, and then that takes us to our Big Ten coaches. Take the next 2 spots for me, which is Franklin and then Lanning.
You would hire James Franklin over Marcus Freeman. By the way, Marcus Freeman would be number 1 in the ACC. He would be number 1.
I would still have Dabo ahead of him. But to your point, I've got Marcus
Freeman. You
don't
even believe that.
Dabo has won national championships, and like I said, if we
all right,
if we think and we had some doubts about this program, portal NIL era, getting back to the playoff, winning the ACC, bringing back a loaded roster, ought to put some of those fears aside. Now, maybe not 100%, but some of them have faded for me since they were so successful last year.
I think Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman, and probably Steve Sarkisian, honestly. So 3, 4, and 5 for me. I think those are the avatars of the modern coach. I think those are the best modern coaches we have that are sort of beginning their rise to dominance. And Sark's been around longer, but I think Lanning and Freeman, it is not an accident that they took over for coaches who were considered and had lots of wins, considered very good coaches, and had a boatload of wins in Brian Kelly and Cristobal, and have made their programs better. And that is a really hard target to hit, a very small target to hit. I understand if you're yelling at your podcast app right now saying, well, I haven't done anything, not long enough. I hear you. I understand. I get it. This is sort of like the Lincoln Riley to Oklahoma conversation, where we all, because we had talked to people and had conversations inside the industry, the level of respect for Lincoln Riley when he got the Oklahoma job was off the charts. And I think Lanning and Freeman are those 2 guys in this modern era, or at least this period of time. I have Dabo Swinney at 6. I have Kyle Whittingham at 7. I have Kalen DeBoer 8, Lane Kiffin 9, James Franklin 10. That's my top 10.
So I've got Marcus Freeman 7, Brian Kelly 8, Kalen DeBoer at 9, and Kyle Whittingham at 10.
I'm too low on Brian Kelly, aren't I?
I mean, this is getting at a point that I'm sort of wrestling with as we're talking. It just feels like we could put a criteria down, and it's just really just eye of the beholder. It's, there's no perfect criteria for doing this. Like, I'm kind of valuing the longevity of some of these coaches a little bit more. Like, I've got concerns like Franklin and Cristobal, like in game management and some of the things, but that's overcome just by amassing a lot of talent and amassing a lot of wins. And you could critique, like I said, with Whittingham, is like, was last year a trend, or was it just like a 1 year speed bump? There's just a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of questions about these guys in the top 10. They're all good coaches. You could pick apart Marcus Freeman. If we had done this ranking after they lost to Northern Illinois, I'm pretty sure his approval rating was not very high.
I think outside of Whittingham, who I think has very little to prove, Dabo doesn't have anything to prove really, but Whittingham's on a different tier. And so Dabo will end up on the Whittingham tier if he doesn't prove something. But if he does prove something this year, he ends up on the Kirby Smart, Nick Saban tier, which like immortality is what Dabo is coaching for this year, that kind of thing. I think all these coaches have something to prove. I mean, Sarkisian, Lanning, Freeman, 2 of those are rebuilding. One of those is number 1 in the nation. Lots to prove. I think James Franklin has a ton to prove this year. Brian Kelly has a ton to prove this year. Like, these guys have a lot to prove in this area. Kalen DeBoer, again, all these guys have something to prove. My favorite group of coaches, though, is like 12 through like 18, which for me is Matt Campbell, Jeff Brom, Chris Kleiman, Josh Heupel, Kirk Cignetti, Mike Elko, Kenny Dillingham. Like that group of guys, like I just really like that group of coaches. Really just interesting personalities, interesting philosophies, modern, recruit, good coaching guys, good CEOs, some track record of success, some upside moving forward. Just a lot of interesting guys in there, 12 through 18. I got Brian Kelly at 11, and Lincoln Riley at 20, so I'm not including them. They have a lot to prove, those 2 guys.
Yeah, I think that's the second theme of the show is like there's no perfect criteria. It's like a lot of these coaches in the top 10 have a lot to prove. Also, look at the number of coaching changes that we've had like over the last 3 to 4 years, and just go and sort the list of coaches by coaching tenure in years and see how many of these, like when you're seeing 30 coaching changes like every season, that's why I think we're getting into this space of there's a lot of coaches with something to prove. I think maybe we did this exercise 10 years ago, Braden. I think we had a lot more coaches that had been at one place for a lot longer, and it probably made this exercise a little bit easier to do. And we didn't have so many coaches in the top 10 with something to prove. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of like Frank Beamers and Barry Alvarez's and Bill Snyder's, and, and hilariously, Kirk Ferentz and Kyle Whittingham were still doing it at that time.
Yeah, right.
They're still going. I think budgets also, I think there's an interesting twist. Like the reason Billy Napier is still employed, and luckily so for Florida, I think, is that budgets and chaos and politics sort of got in the way, and they just said, hey, we're going to go with patience and investment and stay the course for another year, and it worked out. So I wonder how budgets affect the decision to fire folks. Certainly didn't affect Texas A&M, with Jimbo. But I think, the days of the $50-60 million buyout, I think, are well beyond us. I mean, that's only happened once. I don't think that's going to happen again. Lincoln Riley's buyout is like insane, right? It's like in the 80 million or something like that. That's not going to happen. I mean, the days of a $20 million buyout were a big story. And I think I just don't know if we're into that. Like, I think we're kind of going to I think we're pushing back on that, and budgets are going to constrain organizations from making moves. So I think a lot of great coaches in college football, a lot of really quality middle tier coaches, I think, in all of these leagues. I think if you look at like 8 through 12 in a lot of these leagues, I think it's really interesting guys, really interesting potential to move up and down the list. I think there's more national championship caliber coaches than we've had in recent memory. And I think a lot of guys are going to prove something this year or not prove it this year. Sarkisian, Lanning, Freeman, Dabo, Whittingham, DeBoer, Franklin, Kelly, all have a lot to prove, and they're all in that top 15. I'm gonna leave you with this one question. Go check us out on YouTube. What one coaching name outside of your top 10 is going to be a top 10 coach next year?
It's a good question. Do you have somebody on your radar as I'm scrambling my memory banks here?
Number 13 on my list, I think, will be in the top 10 because one or two of those guys that are supposed to prove themselves will not do so and will probably fall back. That could be Kalen DeBoer. That could be Brian Kelly. That could be James Franklin. I don't know. I think Jeff Brom is a top 10 coach.
I was going to say Brom or
Chris Kleiman's another one. I think Kleiman and Brom could both
Yeah.
be considered top 10 coaches this time next year.
Or Kenny Dillingham. Like if Arizona State
Possible.
runs,
I think Brom and Kleiman have more upside this season, I think. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
What about Matt Rule?
I don't think he can get to the top 10, but he could be top 15 maybe.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think he's one that could make a big jump this year. Yes, I agree. Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, could make a huge jump this year.
Good call. Yeah.
So there's a lot of guys that can make. It's going to be fun. I think the coaching ranks are a really interesting thing to study right now because of the changes to the game. So, All right, we ran very, very long today. So apologize. Hope everybody enjoyed our arguments and debates over coaches. It is exclusively about the eye of the beholder. But if you want to send us your rankings, please do so. We would appreciate that. You can get to me at Braden Gall all across the internet, and you get to him at Athlon Steven. Buy a college football preview magazine, athlonsports.com, or a bookstore/newsstand. You young people, Google what those are. You can get those magazines at a newsstand or a bookstore near you. Those are places to buy books and magazines.
I've heard word on the street is Publix is one of the best places to get them right now.
You know, I checked yesterday at my local international Florida-based grocery store, and I could not find it. Was not there. Maybe it was sold out. Maybe they're going so hot that they were sold out.
That's what I'm going to hope for.
All right. Everybody out there, thanks for listening. Rate, review, subscribe. Thumbs up, notifications turned on the YouTube page. For Steven, I'm Braden. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you next time.